The A21A-3 is a Swedish prop fighter in War Thunder with a few big surprises to offer. Let's check it out. Late in the 1930s, the Swedish aviation industry was making some pretty rapid advances into more modern aircraft designs in the anticipation that they were probably going to get sucked into World War II eventually, and obviously they wanted to be prepared. In their desire to push the envelope, the engineers at Saab had been exploring some unorthodox designs for a new fighter. The most significant of the various proposals was for a twin-boom fighter with a pusher engine, a configuration very rarely used in fighters of the day. But Saab felt that it would give their new plane some significant advantages and it would be worth the risk to move forward. The resulting J-21 prototype first flew in mid-1943, by which point World War II was kind of in full swing, making the project both urgent and also at risk of falling behind the rapid advances in aviation that were happening in other countries. The plane did include some significant new features though, including an ejection seat, a cluster of heavy firepower right in the center line, an engine mounting that gained a reputation for being pretty easy in terms of maintenance, and a new laminar flow wing design produced in-house by Saab. The project took quite a bit of time to mature, and it only entered regular service in 1945, with almost 300 being produced in total across all the different versions of the plane. As it became clear that jet power would be the future, Saab was able to develop the J-21 into the J-21R, making it one of only two piston engine fighters in history that was successfully converted to jet power, the other being the Yak-15. Meanwhile, the piston engine version was refined into a ground attack role and equipped with one of the first electronic bombing systems ever fitted to a single-pilot aircraft, which allowed for highly accurate bombing after a little manual configuration by the pilot. All versions of the Saab 21 were retired by the mid-1950s. What we're looking at in War Thunder is the A21A-3, a Swedish fighter in rank 4 with a battle rating of 4.3. As of making this video, this is the lowest BR plane in the game to get a ballistics computer, and it gets the CCRP for its bombs. If you need a refresher on what that is and how to use it, I have a tutorial up that I'll link in the description and at the end of the video. The main armament, however, is going to be the cluster of guns mounted in the nose, right on the plane's centerline, and a couple more out on the wings. It carries two 13.2mm machine guns and a 20mm cannon up in the nose, and the additional two wing-mounted machine guns. All this gives a combined burst mass of just about 5 kilograms per second, which is pretty heavy for a plane at this BR. Now, each one of the different caliber guns gets a pretty standard selection of ammo belts, with a rather effective air targets belt being available, as well as some good options for ground attack. In terms of loadouts, the A21A-3 gets a fairly robust selection of dumb bombs and unguided rockets that come in different configurations, and you're probably going to be able to find one that suits your personal playstyle pretty well. Also, you want to make sure that you pay attention to the stats on the bombs for this one, as the different bombs have some pretty different blast zones, which can end up making a big difference if you're doing close air support or attacking AI ground targets, as opposed to bombing strategic bases. The flight performance of this plane is quite good, and it can give you a serious edge both in air combat and ground attack once you practice a little bit and master its quirks. The first thing to know is that the rate of climb is pretty awful when you take any external loadout, and it's barely average when the plane is clean. This can seriously impact how you fly it out in missions, both air battles and close air support for ground battles. The good news is that it has a fairly good maximum speed at most altitudes, even if its acceleration in level flight isn't really the best. Now, in terms of agility and dogfighting, the A21A-3 retains the excellent turn performance of the entire Saab 21 series, and as long as it doesn't have external weapons mounted out on the wings, the plane will surprise a lot of people with its dogfighting potential. Now, this is amplified even further in arcade battles, where its agility really lets it stand out in Swedish lineups. The plane can deploy combat flaps at a little over 400 kilometers an hour, which can sometimes give that little bit of an extra edge that you need in a tight furball, but you need to resist the temptation to do steep vertical dives in this one, as the wings will rip off at about 675 kilometers an hour. Now, there's an important caveat to know about in terms of the plane's performance. It's tuned for low altitudes. If you climb above about 3,000 meters or so, its turn performance and its engine performance are both noticeably impacted. But as long as you stay down on the deck, it's fast and it turns hard. Flying the A21A-3 into air battles gives some great air combat potential, and it adds a little ground attack to spice things up. What I like to do in realistic battles is take one of the heavier bombs, deposit it on one of the bases using the CCRP, and then go hunting for air targets. Because the climb performance on this one really isn't that great, and its maneuverability is kind of skewed towards lower altitude combat anyway, I usually don't try and do a side climb or anything too much in this one. Its guns are very accurate, and it's a relatively stable firing platform even in turns, which can help bring down targets a little easier than in a lot of other comparable aircraft. The pusher design gives a bit more resilience when you're chasing a bomber or something, but the downside is that the rear-mounted engine is very vulnerable even to low-caliber gunfire when you're in a tail chase. Getting chased, that is. A few solid hits, even from just a .30 caliber into your engine, can cause some really bad cooling problems in this plane, so try not to run from people in a flat chase. Turn and burn until one of you goes down. Now, going out for close air support is kind of where the fun is with this one. The addition of the CCRP ballistics computer might not seem like it would make a huge difference in close air support, especially at these lower tiers with this light bomb load, and the targets are generally going to move around a little bit and all that, but believe it or not, you can get some very accurate bomb drops in this plane. There are two main options for a, sort of an attack profile. If you fly at higher altitude, you can get accurate bomb drops with the CCRP without putting yourself in too much danger from AAA, though you're kind of limited to attacking campers or people that are capping a point. The CCRP absolutely can be used for dive bombing, but it takes practice, and keep the wing rip speed in mind. If you're flying in at low altitude, even though it's a bit riskier, it'll give targets less time to get out of the way, and with a little practice, the CCRP can give this plane an absurd advantage in close air support. In fact, while I was preparing the close air support footage for this review, I got accused of cheating at least 3 or 4 times because of the crazy accuracy on my bomb drops. Visually, I've always thought the Saab 21 series were really fun-looking aircraft, both the props and the jets. This version has wingtip fuel tanks, and unfortunately it doesn't get any interesting paint jobs, but it's still a pretty good-looking aircraft. Landing it is pretty basic, and it has a tricycle landing gear, which means that you can lock up the brakes as soon as you touch down without any risk of nosing over, making the landing run a lot easier than most other prop fighters around this tier. You can drop the gear and flaps safely, both a little over 300 kilometers an hour. The cockpit is wonderfully detailed, and despite having a lot of canopy bracing, the visibility really isn't too bad. The instruments are all distinct and easy to find, and overall, this is a pretty good cockpit, and I really enjoyed flying this out in VR. To close out on the Saab A21A-3. This plane gets a CCRP ballistics computer at a very low battle rating. It's got good forward firepower. It's a stable gun platform even in a turn. It can carry some pretty flexible loadouts of external weapons, and it's reasonably good in dogfights. However, the rate of climb isn't great, its engine is vulnerable to low-caliber gunfire from behind, and its overall engine performance is slightly behind the curve compared to other planes around this BR. The final verdict on the A21A-3 is that this plane has amazing potential for low-tier close air support due to the ballistics computer and the high blast radius bombs, and it can hold its own in air combat with only a very small learning curve. This is a really good aircraft overall, and if flown well, it can be an absolute beast in any role, in any game mode. As always, thanks for watching.